Good evening and good morning, everyone, depending on where you are on the globe. Thank you for joining our webinar, Designing the Human Side of AI. I'm your host, Zirwa Abbas, PR Manager at xiQ. A few housekeeping items before we begin. We'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have a question, please feel free to send it through the Q&A channel at the bottom of your player. We'll be answering your questions at the end of the session. Today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session and is accessible through registering on the website. Lastly, we'd encourage you to share this webinar within your social circle as well. Over the past years, xiQ has witnessed an extreme growth as a B2B sales and marketing catalyst. Consequently, the role of its product designers has also evolved towards the stewardship of an ever larger, more holistic platform technology. With AI as the foundation of xiQ, scaling product design while maintaining a consistent user experience pushed UX craftsmanship to the edge. Our guest speaker for today, Adam Smith, is going to shed light on the requisites of outstanding user-centric design solutions and the evolving role of AI in product design. Adam is a champion for human-centered solutions that converge with business needs and objectives. Over the duration of his outstanding career, Adam has held top positions at names like PwC and Rogers and Fido Self-Serve, which is a Canadian telecom giant. And he has over 2 decades of experience as an independent consultant, working with a variety of enterprise and startup companies. He brings a unique mix of customer experience, visual design, technical skills, and capabilities, together with the business acumen to create products and experiences that mutually benefit the user, the customer, and the business, just like he has done for xiQ. It is quite remarkable. And we have Usman Sheikh, founder and CEO of xiQ, which is a next generation AI-powered SaaS platform for B2B sales and marketing. Throughout his career, Usman has held leadership positions in product management, sales enablement, and digital commerce globally at companies like SAP. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here. I will hand it over to you, Usman, to kick things off.
Thank you, Zirwa. And Adam, welcome to our webinar, as well as to all the people out there in the audience. Thank you for joining us. If you can share the first slide, please, if you can just throw that up. I truly appreciate it. What I'd like to do is, since a lot of the people that are on the call today, you don't know what xiQ is, I'd like to take a minute to explain what our company does, what our product does, and then introduce an old friend of mine that we actually initially conceptualized xiQ together on the whiteboards. And as fate would have it, 7 years later, we converged to kind of collaborate in putting together the next level of what xiQ is going to be all about. And we'll be talking to Adam, really exciting talk. But if we can move to the next slide, just to kind of give everybody in the audience an idea of what xiQ does. Can you go to the slide, which is the ring slide, please? I don't think this is in the right order. Yeah, that's where we were starting from. Yeah. So what we are is, we are a sales and marketing platform, and we are driven by AI. One of the unique couple of things about xiQ is that we actually provide a closed loop platform. What that means is that we help sales, we provide information to sellers, business intelligence to sellers on how to sell better, how to understand their prospects better. At the same time, we help them find content to be able to engage those prospects together. And lastly, we have an analytics engine. This is unique in the context of sales and marketing, because this is one of the few, if not the only system that provides a closed loop service, uses artificial intelligence to actually help you sell better by providing information on individuals, companies, recommendations on content to use to engage your clients and prospects, and then analytics to extrapolate intent data. A lot of big words. Bottom line is, it's a complex, sophisticated platform that leverages artificial intelligence for highly sophisticated use cases. Next, please. And a couple of things I want to point out. At the core of it is the business of selling and marketing. That's what we really do. So knowing your customer is of primary importance. And to this end, we have xiQ has built AI algorithms that help you predict and provide insights into the behavioral mind of a person. So that's as we're going to be talking about UX, that's a fairly complex um, machine to human interaction that needs to be communicated. This is machine predicting how other people think to help me as a human make a better relationship. xiQ is doing that. Secondly, we use xiQ to develop content to help us find relevant topics to engage our clients with. And thirdly, we use our own artificial intelligence to analyze what is resonating within, what engagement is being driven within the customer. So this is a fairly complex and a fairly large set of processes that xiQ provides, and is very sophisticated and complex in terms of what we do. Now go back to that first slide, please, which had the $12 trillion. Just to kind of give you an idea in terms of what are we talking about, B2B e-commerce today is a $12 trillion industry. Okay, today in 2021, $12 trillion go through that. MarTech, marketing and sales technology solutions, make up about $121 billion in terms of spend. Companies spend annually $121 billion on technology that's marketing and sales technology, which is where xiQ would broadly fall into that. But subset of that is sales and marketing technology that is leveraging AI. That's the subset of that. And that is already a $52 billion market. And that's really where xiQ fits in. Let's go forward, please. Just to kind of give you an example of who would be some of the clients, go to the client slide, please. Here's an example. A lot of large multinational companies like Dell, Accenture, Nutanix, AWS, Entity Data, semiconductor companies. A lot of these companies that you're seeing, the logos that you're seeing up here, belong to some really large global enterprises. And these are companies that are using cutting edge AI-based tools to equip their sales force en masse. So at Dell, we have a very big footprint and growing. In most of these companies, we have big footprints and growing. Not only are we doing well with the type of clients you can see up here, NetApp, for example, Entity Data, we are also getting recognition from our clients, and we've won awards. We've won 8 awards so far. Most of these are on G2, which is a client review site. If you can go forward, please, from here. Just as we start this conversation, and again to kind of set the kind of the table for it and frame this discussion today, if you add up the total revenue of xiQ clients, that adds up to about $750 billion. Just for our colleagues in Pakistan, Pakistan's economy is about $60 billion in terms of its annual government budget. This is 750 billion, more than 11 times the size, in terms of our customer base. Next, important to realize that the company is on a growth path. Our product is being accepted in the market. Our ideology, our methodology is considered next generation. Our AI is producing results like none before. And while this pandemic was hitting and people were downsizing last year, xiQ was actually recruiting. As a matter of fact, we grew in size by 400%, and our user footprint grew by 3,000%, 30x. If you go to the next slide, please. And so that's kind of like a little bit of a background as to you've never met xiQ and seen. Today, it's a great pleasure for me to start a conversation. The reason for us inviting our own head of UX design to come and talk is because xiQ is now, first of all, it's a very sophisticated user experience. You will get to see it. But we are embarking on a journey to build the next user experience. And what we wanted to do is kind of share and chronicle that in public with all colleagues, all friends of xiQ that are on the call. We want to be able to show you how a world-class designer handles a extremely sophisticated, tough business problem, tough user experience, tough client experience problems. These are big challenges. Um, Zirva did a great job in introducing Adam. Just before I kind of ask you, Adam, to tell us a little bit about yourself, um, we met about 7 or 8 years ago. I used to be at SAP, and Adam was a consultant at that time. And we kind of started talking, and we ended up talking for a whole weekend in a conference room with whiteboards covered up with all sorts of diagrams and things that we've written. And at that point, we gave birth to the idea of what a AI powered end-to-end B2B sales and marketing platform could look like. Um, we parted ways at that stage. I kept on building this, and we've had the opportunity about a month ago to bring Adam back in, and we're collaborating on kind of, as I said, designing the next generation. So, with that, Adam, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
Well, I may look a little different than the picture that you showed. I've been hibernating like most of us during COVID, but I've been in the design space for about 25 years now. Initially, when you and I connected, I was running my initial company, and which I put to bed quite a few years ago. But I did that for a good 20 years, and as was mentioned, I worked for a telco in Canada focused on self-serve. So anything that had to do with logging into your account or managing stuff, we were able to do some really powerful things for customers. And I did a stint at PwC as a lead UX there, and got the opportunity to work on some pretty interesting large-scale problems. It's something that I've always wanted to go back to working on my own stuff and have the opportunity to work with great products like xiQ. And here I am.
Great. So, Adam, we have a lot of young, aspiring UI UX designers, and we kind of structured our discussion around four key topics today. But I want to go a little bit and kind of dig with you a little bit in terms of some basic understanding. So, what is design thinking? We'll talk about, but a commonly asked questions, especially in UI UX interviews, is can you explain the difference between UX and UI? Right? Very, very basic thing. What would you tell our audience? What is the difference between UX and UI?
Oof, wow. I mean, I would love to say that there's a simple answer for that, but there really isn't. On the surface, UX is more about the functional, the systemic design of a product or service, the interactions and the organization of information, features, functionality into logical flows that make it easier for users to comprehend and to use. And at a very basic level, UI is more about imbuing that experience with the personality, the behavioral and emotional aspects that you want to convey to your users, and taking that UX to another level in terms of simplicity and clarity. The two are very intertwined. I'm very fortunate to have started out as a graphic designer from an education standpoint, and then mostly because I'm as old as I am, and you can tell through the beard, I started building websites in the mid 90s, mostly out of the desire to see fidelity of the designs that I was creating actually be reproduced on the web. So I got really deep into the technology, and as a result of being a visual designer, a properly trained graphic designer, and understanding the technology, that led me very, very quickly and logically into user experience. And I really dove into that and spent probably the last 15 years of my career has been very much focused on that aspect, because that's where you get the opportunity to work with technology, to work with product, to work with business and to work with users and really understand all of the aspects and find a common ground for all of them. And that's a challenge that's what gets me up in the morning.
Excellent. Adam, that brings us to the core question. One of these big movements out there that we've seen is this discussion around design thinking. Tell us, what is design thinking? Tell us a little bit about what is this Uber concept of design thinking?
Sure. So design thinking, from its intent originally, born out of IDEO and their process of inclusion, really. Let me step back. So the process of design, let's examine that first, and then I'll speak to how that applies in design thinking. So the idea of design is really the ability to look at a problem and to disassemble it into its component elements, and then reach out and find connections to things that are adjacent or arm's length, and real time bring those things together and then reassemble that element into something entirely new. And this is the process that a designer does, and they do that by zooming really, really deep in to focus on something, but they're able to simultaneously look at it from a bird's eye level. So you're always looking at it from both perspectives, and that really informs each other. So it's, okay, I want to deal with this detailed element here that has to accomplish this, but how does that fit into the bigger picture? So design thinking is really a method to include business teams, other departments within the organization, whether it be customer, whether it be finance, whether it be technology, and hopefully customers, into the design thinking process. So what it does is, and the general process of the double diamond, where you start with the problems. And from a design perspective, one of the tenets of design is you never design for a system or a technology, you always design for a user or a person. And that drives everything that we do. So with design thinking, you start to look at the problems that a user has. And generally, that'll be done through a user journey for the particular problem that you're looking at. And you go as wide as you can, and you find as many of the problems as possible. And then through a prioritization process, you bring that back down. And the reason that works is because if you have people with different professions and different skills within an organization, and you have representation from your customers, you're able to do that much, much faster with a fully inclusive, full picture of everyone's perspectives. Because, if you don't do that, you're going to be off here designing something that you think is amazing. And then once you get to another department, they're like, well, it doesn't work that way. It was a great idea, but that's just not how it functions. So with that inclusion, when you get everybody in the room and you allow them to start to think in this super focused and bird's eye view at the same time, you're able to get the full perspectives and the inputs you need to create or to identify the solution, the problems that are most worth solving. You do the same thing for solutions. So once you have your core group of problems that you want to address, you could do the same thing. You go as wide as possible in potential solutions. You look at a future state. What could this potentially be? And then again, you start to hone back in on which of those problems are most worth solving right now. And then you focus on that. And really what it does in a very short period of time, sometimes I've seen it done in an afternoon, sometimes I've seen it done over the course of a week. The design thinking process can actually get you from 0 to 100 much more quickly than anyone working independently. And really that's what it's all about, is bringing in the perspectives and the voices that are necessary to make exclusive and inclusive design solutions.
Yeah. If you can go back to the design slide, please. Adam, design thinking is something that is now also traversing into the business world. And a lot of schools, for example, Stanford and Wharton and Harvard Business School, these guys talk extensively and actually even teach design thinking as a business philosophy now, in terms of how, as a management style and a management philosophy, and a very successful one. And I think partially the reason, as you said, you can get into the full, into nitty-gritty details while still maintaining that bird's eye view. I think that kind of mind frame and mindset in terms of thinking and looking at problems and analyzing problems and problem solving is universal. It's not just to design problems. And as a matter of fact, we come out for the better if we apply that design thinking in building businesses. Living example is, by the way, myself, because of two reasons. One, I don't know if you know this, Adam, but my first educational background and training is as an architect. And the first 10 years of my career, I was actually an architect, a building architect. And and then, I ran a business around process engineering, which was a lot of embodiment of design thinking. And finally, I ended up at SAP, where they were, pioneering design thinking in B2B, partnering actually with IDEO and Stanford, and kind of launching the D School, which is the Hasso-Plattner D School over there. So very interesting. So design thinking is much broader than just simply UX or UI. It is now becoming a framework for actually business.
Yes, no, just one last point to that. It's a perspective and approach, really. And it's not specific to design. It's just a way of thinking and approaching problems. It's lovely to see that the rest of the world is finally catching up with designers.
Yeah. Okay. I introduced xiQ and I introduced the AI level of it. One of the things we say when we describe xiQ, Adam, is that we use AI to humanize experiences, right? So what is, you now know this platform, and what is the human-centric element? What is that human face that AI requires? And does AI actually help better humanize relationships?
Absolutely. So, the technology that sits underneath xiQ is tremendously powerful. But by its very nature, it's also quite complex. There's a lot of capabilities, a lot of features. And what you can do, apart from just the design process in terms of simplification and finding the least barrier prone methods of designing the interactions and providing information to users, what you can do with AI and the idea of AI and designing for AI is kind of scary, right, at first, because as designers, we're used to working in the two-dimensional, three-dimensional if we consider time. And when you want to design for a user and you start to think about artificial intelligence, it gets a little, how do I do that? How do I apply artificial intelligence? It has no button, it has no trigger, it has no necessarily, it doesn't even have a UI that's associated with it. So there's a challenge there. But what you do to bring AI into a product such as xiQ is you start to look at where the intelligence is hidden. And if you can unlock that intelligence that's deep within that system and make it understandable, timely, and relevant to the user, then all of a sudden the opportunities for how AI can be leveraged in a product just open up. It stops being about how do you design the UI of or the UX of AI. It's how do you unlock this and present it to your customers in the moments where they actually need it. Hopefully, and I believe we're going to be doing this with xiQ before they even know they need it. And that is a whole new opportunity and a whole new perspective at looking at the experiences you deliver to a user. And there are things that AI allows us to do now that were only pipe dreams, perhaps, when you and I were sitting in that boardroom.
So absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, that's what I was thinking, that when the core reason for why we built xiQ was to help literally is the key word, are people that were stuck in the mundane of doing your regular tasks and doing them in silos, to break them out across them and give them the view across their horizon, right, into what could happen. And that's when we started looking at that, how do we take somebody out of just doing pipeline entries just doing account research, just hanging around on LinkedIn, and the 16 different technology solutions, when you get them out of that, what are the possibilities? So one is, what are the use cases that suddenly open up, right? Because everything is streamlined, and what took, 25 days or 30 days to process can now be done in 25 or 30 seconds or less, 2 to 3 seconds, right?
Yeah.
And so when you have that kind of computing advantage, right, what does the world look like then? You're not going to operate in this way that you operated when you were taking 24 days to do one thing, especially when you can do it in 3.5 seconds, right? So
Right.
that's a big thing. Second thing that we realized, Adam, was that too much unstructured data resides on the internet. However, if you can structure it and distill it, it is extremely valuable, right? And so we actually came with a human problem to solve. And in the journey, we discovered that AI, by virtue of us being able to help understand the mindset, the behavioral traits of an individual, AI is actually helping improve the human to human experience, right?
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
helping me, it's providing me with that empathy. People talk about empathy, you need to gain empathy, right?
Mhm.
It's kind of an intangible cloud of a word, right? Like, how do I put my hands around empathy, right? xiQ starts to kind of put some structure around it. These are things that you should have. These are the foundational things you should know about your prospective buyer if you want to have empathy, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And it allows a higher order of thought because it's taking the mundane out, and providing intent, in providing context to you in the moment. And there's a simplicity in that, that allows you as a user of the system to focus on more important things, because it's about understanding what, instead of trying to figure out where's my content, how do I communicate, how do I build this vehicle to reach my market, my customers. Instead, you're actually trying to figure out what is it that they want to hear from me. How do I build that trust? How do I become a valuable source of information and trust for my customers? And we can do that because we understand through that unstructured data. We can actually take that and turn that into real-time understanding. So we're not, the level of effort that we're removing from a user is tremendous, and it really allows them to think more strategically and more effectively. And that's a powerful tool.
Adam, I mean, wasn't this kind of ironic in a lot of ways that, we're using AI to better the human experience, right? The human to human experience. That's kind of, you think it kind of counterintuitively, right? I see AI as the Terminator, right? Maybe that's one incarnation of it. But here, it's actually by helping us understand the human behavior code, it's helping us actually build better bridges, right? It's kind of guiding us. Look, you can communicate better, right?
Yep.
You can be understood better. I think there's a lot of problems in that, right? In design wise as well, right?
Yep, absolutely. It very much ties back to the way a designer thinks. With that zoom in, zoom out. The AI is able to do that with your data, which is just too complex to understand and to research and to keep top of mind at all times for the human mind. But the AI becomes the assistant that does that multinodal analysis at the most focal, but also at the big picture, and then it just gives you the answers, and it gives you the information that you need, and perhaps that you didn't even know you needed. So the AI, in a way, embodies the way that a designer actually already thinks, and is able to see things that others may not be able to, and that's the power of AI when you use it the right way, as opposed to a Terminator.
All right, Adam, you said it. Okay, so now I have to ask this question, which is, so is AI going to be able to replace you as a AI going to be able to replace the UX designer?
Not. I doubt that it will in my time. And perhaps I say that because I love what I do and I just hope that it doesn't. Um, but as we're talking about this, the ability to understand the context at the high level and the low level is something that computationally is simple for a computer. You can learn patterns, and a lot of UX is about best practices and patterns. Will it be able to automate the creation of standard experiences? I believe that it can. You and I have spoken about how AI is creating original works of art now, and that's mind-boggling. But it works, and it does that by the same way that the human brain does. It has experiences, it brings them together, it connects them, it finds similarities, and it generates something new based on all the experiences that it's had. And that is what an artist does. An artist communicates their perspective and their experience through an image or through word, and it's something that is going to be possible 100% from an AI perspective. However, I wonder how much that would stagnate the evolution of experience design. Should that be managed and run entirely by an AI? Because computationally, if that worked before, let's use it again. It's more efficient, right? I could be completely wrong, and like the first time an AI starts creating a UX, it just blows everything out of the water.
It does, and the interesting thing and the challenge over here, not necessarily the challenge, maybe the opportunity is that using tools like that, like xiQ, AI can even more custom tailor and custom tweak the experience for specific users because it has so much publicly available information, analytics around you, insights, your historic behavior. It can pick all that information and really custom craft that right at scale. So that's kind of, but that leads us to kind of another, we hear this word empathy, especially since pandemic kicked in. We've started to hear the word empathy being used all over the place, right? Empathy, salespeople have to develop empathy, marketing people have to develop empathy, designers have to have empathy, everybody has to empathy. It's kind of, what is empathy, right? What really is empathy? And is this something that, we is this just a natural instinct? Is empathy similar to sympathy? What is the difference? Maybe help us start by explaining, what do you think is empathy?
So empathy, to me, I feel like has been a secret sauce for designers, because if you are a good designer, then you do have good empathy. It's required. And what empathy really is there's the ability, like if you consider it the ability to see someone and their situation and understand it, that's the ability to be aware. Then if you were able to have sympathy for someone's other situation, then you understand perhaps that that's not a great situation for the other person, and then you can feel that and you understand that, right? Empathy is the ability to take your own existence and put it into the shoes of another person, to understand what it is that they're going through, and not at a surface level, but to really start to think about how that affects their motivations, their personality, their emotional state, and really start to think about their base needs and their base desires in that situation. To me, that's what empathy is, and it's something that I think is a natural instinct to a degree, but I believe that it can be learned. But it's not a good news story when you talk about learning empathy, because I think you need to go through some pretty bad things and really experience a wide range of emotions, and really have a sense for what the negative situation may be. And you have to be extremely introspective person, and not just think like I'm upset by that, but why? Like, what is it that that it is that's triggering me to be upset? And you really have to be able to think about that at a deep psychological level. And once you can start to abstract yourself from your own emotions, then you can actually then transfer that and use that as an understanding of the situation and context of others, and potentially what they're thinking and striving for. You know, from a design perspective, that's what we want to know is what are your goals? Like, what are your challenges, and what are the pains that you're facing, and how do we help solve for those? And as a designer, that's our job.
Yeah, I think empathy can be also learned. If I kind of go back to the experiences of enterprise sales, you know, in the traditional days, the sales reps were always, you know, hovering around within their prospects' buildings. You know, they were walking the halls, they were meeting the people, having water cooler discussions, and all they were doing is gathering a lot of signals, right? Personal signals, signals that they could help them understand what are the personal objectives. And you know, that kind of is going to bring up another question regarding this Maslow's. If you can share the slide, Maslow's triangle, right? But you know, this is kind of the way it was, right? People are always gathering this the information so that they can better process and kind of personalize that experience. Um, and what we've seen happen is it's been happening for a long time, right? People are less and less wary of sales guys walking around the hallways of their building, right?
Yep.
Number one. And number two, the universe of people that are making decisions, involved in decision making, is getting bigger. So your buyer group within a client, especially since we deal with B2B, so your empathy doesn't need to be just towards one people. It needs to be towards, there's got to be group empathy as well. There's individual and group empathy that you have to build. And so again, I feel tools like xiQ are great tools because it kind of uncovers the way people think. You know, what you see on surface, it kind of goes behind that, and that's pretty revolutionary. That, you know, it's kind of tapping into 100-year-old behavioral science models, and it's able to help you go past the obvious veneer of individuals to really see how the wheels turn, right?
Yeah.
So folks on the call, if you don't know this, you can go to xiqinc.com and you can download a free version of our app, and you can sign up and look up yourselves, right? Type in your name, type in the name of your company, and xiQ will make a prediction in terms of how one should approach you. This is what I'm referring to over here, that this is artificial intelligence actually helping us become better at collaborating and working with each other, right? So xiqinc.com, they can put it on the chat as to where you can go. It's also on iStore and on Google. So Maslow's hierarchy, you know, I put this up there, Adam, initially thinking I'm going to trip you by using a big word and a very complex kind of pyramid diagram to kind of trip you over. But then when we were doing the dry run, you said, hey, this is my, tell us, you know, what is Maslow's hierarchy and of value? And why is this the epicenter in your life as the epicenter of design?
So, I mean, yeah, it's something that's foundational for me in terms of what what a designer needs to do, and it's part empathy, it's part understanding, but it's really about getting at the psychology of your user, because everything that a designer does is about understanding and having empathy for your user, and really trying to figure that out. Not at a surface level, but what are their motivations, you know? And this ties right back to what we were just talking about, in terms of empathy and can it be learned? But the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's really a foundational element for me in my understanding of where a user is, and what are they going through, and it's a good checklist, really, to start to categorize what's important to a user depending on what stage they're in. So if you look at the triangle, the bottom tier is the physiological needs. So do you have food? Are you in threat of being hurt or dying? You know, whether will you starve? But hopefully, you know, from a user experience perspective, we're not dealing with those kind of challenges with the interfaces we design. And as you ratchet up, it's the level of threat reduces and the level of higher cognitive power opens up for your user. So it's really an inverse relationship. Safety and security, we're still dealing with that basic fear model. Love and belonging is once you start to not have to worry about fear, you start to worry about how you belong with your social circles, who it is that you are, and you start to try to understand yourself in context of a larger group. Self-esteem is more about understanding yourself as an individual and the challenges that you face. So for example, my sales and marketing team, you know, what are our challenges, but then me individually, what are my core challenges, perhaps based on my role or based on, you know, my experience level. And then finally you get into self-actualization, and that's when you know, it's a rare level to reach for many people, but and I wouldn't say that I'm there either, but you know, self-actualization is really about I have my core needs met, and I now have the freedom to think and to act without fear or concern for my life or where I belong or whom will judge me. And it's if you think about it at that human existence level, which is what Maslow was trying to put together, if you can translate that into the stage at which your user is going through, and perhaps that's from the first time they enter an application, and how do you ratchet up their level in the triangle, and how do you alter the experience that you're providing them based on their context, based on how they feel, whether it be the physical world, the situation that they're dealing with that and the application that you're helping with, or if it's just getting familiar with the product. This hierarchy of emotional and mental safety and security can really be repurposed to even the smallest onboarding experience, if you will. But it's really about understanding where your users are. And I use it in everything that I do, perhaps not consciously, but it's a core tenet of how I approach understanding my users.
Great. Adam, you've just recently joined xiQ. Kind of help us summarize a little bit in terms of what is the opportunity you see? What is it that you see as exciting about xiQ?
Yeah, so from a user experience and design standpoint, you know, xiQ is at a very, very critical point where we have a tremendous technology stack, access to vast amounts of data, and as a result of that, tremendous insights for our users on their customers. And with that understanding, we're at a point now where we can take like your user experience to more of that self-actualization level, to bring it back to Maslow. Because if the AI can start taking care of the core functions, the menial tasks, and you know, xiQ becomes your AI assistant in managing some of these lower level tasks, you actually open up the possibility to really think about your role and your relationship with your customers in at a higher order. And how do you design for that? What are the experiences that matter? You know, as you're leveling up to, I don't have to worry about X, Y, or Z. These are the things that are now important to me, and how do we leverage the data that is available within xiQ to create experiences that are dynamic, they're personalized, they're relevant, they're contextual, they're timely, and how do you turn that into an experience for users? It's a very interesting problem to solve, and you know, it's not something that's going to be that rare 5 to 10 years from now. But for right now, there's not too many opportunities to work as a UX designer on this type of an AI model, where it's not a pipe dream. You know, this is what's actually happening, and we need to solve for it. And there's not that many opportunities out there to work on this level of AI and UX.
Yeah, Adam, we're really privileged and excited to actually have you on board, and I love the fact that we've been able to kind of come back together. If you can move to the next slide, this kind of brings up the next question. So what you've just said, and I fully concur with you, that the opportunity is huge, and it's cutting edge. It's really, really cutting edge at this time, because it is not something that, as you know this market really, really well as well, that it's not something that's prevalent out there. It's something that is extremely unique, and it's highly, highly, highly innovative. It's cutting edge. You've seen a few of these, but I go in front of my customers and prospects all the time, and we constantly keep hearing, never seen anything like this, phenomenal. People get super, super excited about it. And to meet that challenge and the sophistication and the breadth, because it's not a small product, it's not a screen, it's not a mobile app that we're doing. It's mobile apps, it's dashboards, it's curation, marketing, workflow automations, it's web applications, it's dashboards, it's websites. All of that is xiQ. It's huge, guys. So we're looking to hire people. So if I were to ask you, Adam, what would be, like, you're hiring your team right now, you're hiring a number of people. What are the 3 qualities that you would look for in a UX designer that you might be recruiting for?
So for one, obviously, we talk about empathy, but understanding our user and their context. And as a result of that, like, you need to understand or be willing to learn about the business that our users are in. What is the context that they're going through on a day-to-day basis, and how do we design for that? I'm looking for people that are willing to take a risk in terms of exploring opportunities for improved UIs and user experiences, but are also at the same time, basing that in reality. One of the things that we always need to stay cognizant of is when we're coming up with a visual design or a user experience, is this something that's technically feasible? And how do we make this a logical, achievable goal from a design perspective? I strongly want to see somebody who's willing to work as collaborators with product and with technology, and really have an understanding and empathy for your teammates and what they're going through. But somebody who wants to push the edge, and really try to find what tomorrow's experiences look like today. And that's what we're going for. Yeah, just somebody who's like a go-getter and willing to push beyond their own expectations of themselves, and really strive to do something phenomenal.
Great. So, folks, it's advertised up there. You can see where the job board is. Looking for people that can come into a high growth, fast, rapid growth environment. The scope is pretty extensive. So your ability to ingest, organize, and perform is definitely going to be stretched. Let's put it quite frankly over there. And we're not going to kind of, I would go away from this slide, please, and go back to the previous slide. Leave that up. So a couple of questions have come up. Zirva, are you going to ask those questions? I think there's one from
Yes, Usman.
Ahmed Khan Niazi. He's saying, how do you deal with confirmation bias during your UX design process?
Wow.
Usman, sorry to interrupt. I would like to bring this to your attention that we have 5 minutes to end this session. Thank you.
We have.
So bias is something that's very challenging as a designer to begin with, but also when you start dealing with artificial intelligence. You know, it's something that we need to leverage the full perspective, and that's why when we do design thinking, we need to be very, very inclusive, and try to remember that as a designer, we are a vessel. And if we can take those voices as inputs and then analyze them and put them out and bring that back to our users and refine that with whether it be through user testing and validation, that's how we do it as a designer. But we also can do that for the AI, you know, with the learning patterns and the information that's being brought back. It's perpetually being tested and validated through the product. So the bias is it's always going to be a challenge, and it's something that we'll always have to deal with. But it's through ensuring that the same perspectives that are present throughout in an input are also there as a checkpoint in our outputs. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that's good. There's one other question I'd like to bring up, which was, where did it go? Has your solution helped you in designing and improving your own product? Amra Jawad asked this question. I'll start and you can expand on that, Adam. So absolutely, xiQ tracks every little thing a user does in many different environments, down to the fact that what are actually users reading. And based on what they're reading, we are provided with what is their intent, because our AI can extrapolate that. So that traceability and insights of what's working, what's not working, what are the preferences of the user, our platform is actually giving us. It's been designed, it's been calibrated to give us that feedback. And Adam and team, and he'll expand a little bit on it, they use this kind of information exactly around those things like confirmation bias, for example, right? Mm-hmm. So go ahead, Adam, if you want to add something.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to keep it short, but you know, what we were able to see is when let's say somebody's creating a marketing vehicle to communicate with their audience, we're able to see how effective those campaigns and vehicles are. And what that does is it actually allows us and gives us feedback in real time on understanding the assumption of our user versus the reality of the outcome. And to have that information in our hands has been tremendously valuable in determining how we allow users to interact and craft their communications within the system. But at the same time, understanding that if that information is valuable to us, how do we make that information valuable and visible back to our own users to allow them to make better decisions right from the get-go. So that's been a very strong motivator in how we approach the design. Is how do we better establish our users to make more informed and better decisions, and that's our mantra, you know. How do we add value?
There's another interesting question along the same line of the bias. What is your perspective on designer bias? But I think here's the second part is, would you prefer to go with what is in vogue, or would you prefer to go with something new in UX?
Wow. So in vogue, never. It's not to me, that's not a thing. That's a temporary passing fad that's not relevant.
Yeah.
If you tie your solution back to an actual need of a user that solves a real and actual problem in a way that makes that solution most applicable and relevant, then whatever anyone else is doing today doesn't matter, because you've actually solved the problem for your user. So I am not a fan of fads, trends, anything of that sort.
Okay. Where do you think we should draw the line in user privacy and storing information for the sake of making our designs? How do you ensure we use such information data responsibly? Good question.
It's a good question. You know, we're not Facebook. We're not tracking you when you make personal communications with friends. We're not getting invasive. You know, what we're doing is we're providing analytics on the effectiveness of something that I, as the sender, have delivered to my recipients. We're using that information to analyze the effectiveness at a very granular level, but we're not actually breaching outside of what we're actually communicating with our users already, and allowing our customers to send to theirs. So there's an implicit agreement for us to be able to track from an email. It's to be honest, it's just there's so much to it, and it is quite advanced, and we are pulling things from various places on the public internet to help us inform and educate our customers about the people that you're communicating with. But from a privacy standpoint, we're not tracking anything that goes outside of a professional context, and really what you, as a recipient of my email, if I were a user, have agreed to receive from me. You know, worst case scenario, unsubscribe. But we don't see that very often.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
sorry,
Adam and
Nirma, are we pushed for something? Can we stay a little bit?
I'm told that the session will end soon, so
No,
I think
it will not end. It should not end. So let me. There was a couple of other questions that are related to xiQ in the context of Pakistan. One is, how have companies in Pakistan received it? Our technology is built primarily for B2B and marketing and sales. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, we are at this point not at that level of B2B marketing and selling. A lot of B2C, a lot of great B2C telecommunications, beverages, CPG products, etc. Those are the big industries. Even the automotive is growing and so on, but not much B2B. So as such, we haven't really ventured into Pakistan that much. Having said that, great opportunity for people in Pakistan to actually become part of a movement. xiQ is a movement. It's not just a product, it's a movement. We kind of holistically see how we're going to shift. We're not making incremental little itsy bitsy changes. We're redesigning how, like I said earlier, you know, what used to take 24 days can be done in 2.5 seconds. What does the world look like? That's what xiQ's pathway is. We're designing what the world looks like when you have the computational power of artificial intelligence and the agility and the speed. What does that work look like? That's what Adam is designing. That's the human interface of AI, something that thinks in much bigger quantity than a human mind can, right? But it's thinking like that specifically to support a human mind. So it does that. There's one other question. Does xiQ have potential in developing economies like Pakistan? And my answer to that person, it was Zaim Sakif. Pakistan has a transformational, xiQ has a transformational impact on Pakistan, not necessarily so by bringing xiQ as a technology platform to Pakistan, but by being a company where we're kind of rethinking the entire way things work, not for incremental, like I said, itsy bitsy changes, but at a massive level. Look at the names of our clients. Look at the size of our clients. You know, that's not a small change. People don't bite small. Those companies bite big, and we're doing that. So our goal, my personal goal, is to employ people who are entrepreneurs. They kind of come to xiQ for a number of years as entrepreneurs in residence. The best learning laboratory in Pakistan in IT, in AI, in user experience is xiQ. Come here, learn. This is a fast-paced environment, a lot of responsibilities. We're only looking for mature individuals. Very, very important. We're going to be highly selective in terms of who we pull in. It's going to be extremely mature. But our goal is that when they graduate from our company, they will be able to form mega companies of their own. We're on our flight path to becoming a multi-billion-dollar company, right? And we are inviting people to come at the early stage of the journey, join us, become participants, and help us achieve those goals. And when you go on that journey, I can swear to this, that what you will learn, you will never, never be able to learn in a big multinational experience. So everybody needs to think about that. What does that mean for them? And send us your CVs and let's talk. So with that, I'm going to start concluding. A couple of things I wanted to say. I don't know, Zirva, if we have the next webinar scheduled and invited for. If not, as I mentioned, what we were going to do is Adam and I are going to start meeting again. And today was kind of an introduction to Adam, introduction to xiQ session. But folks, come back in about 4 weeks, April 22nd, I believe. Is that correct? April 22nd, guys, Zirva, anybody know?
Yes, Usman. We'll be scheduling it for
Yeah, so April 22nd, we're going to do that. And in that, we will have Adam tell us how did he go about kind of the first metamorphosis of the product? What did he see when he came in? How did he decide to kind of skin the cat? And how did he decide to kind of restructure and rebuild and redesign the next level? Okay, so that's going to be in our next session. And we're going to keep doing this, folks. And happy to come and talk at universities, fireside chats, etc. But this is where it's going to be. We're building a powerhouse team, so come and join us. With that, Zirva, I'm done. You can put your closing remarks in. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you so much, Adam and Usman, for such an insightful session. It was pretty amazing. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions today. We've received a few more, and we'll try to address as many as we can over emails and phone calls. Those of you who've asked, you will receive a recording of this session in your mailboxes within 48 hours. If you have any questions or you want to learn more, you can log on to our website, xiqinc.com, and schedule a free consultation with us. Thanks again for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.